Good afternoon. This is the second interview with Brendan Cartmel, who kindly suggested it to hear my thoughts on the IDM community and on CDF. And here's Brendan. Brendan, I welcome you. Please go ahead.
Yes, hello, and welcome to viewers wherever you are, and welcome to you, Otto.
Thank you.
This is the second series of interviews where I'm probing Otto on his thoughts on IDM's CDF and use of dialectical thought forms. I expect the question is relevant to those of us who are in the dialectic thinking professional community, whether we're in management or in academia, and familiar with IDM's training. For those of you who are not so familiar with IDM's training, hopefully you'll still be able to intuit some of the benefits of dialectic inquiry for organisational development. Now, I'll just make a few comments about interview number one. In that interview, we ranged across the whole scope of IDM's CDF framework and some of the origins of the theory. Otto, you iterated that CDF was a tool for dialogue as much as anything else. It enabled dialogue with self as much as it did with dialogue with other people. And it was a dialogue into truth and exploration into the truth of our thought development and the construction of our thinking. So I asked Otto about preconceptions, the fact that dialogue is in effect an inquiry into how we preconceive and begin to form our ideas even before we begin to speak. So dialectic is what is said by us as we try and think about our real experience of how we experience life as being real. So when we're talking, often we might say things and we're asked a question, we may say, well, well, it's sort of like this. Now, at that moment, we're sort of trying to construct language in our head and to express what it's really like for us. And an example of this might be where we have two ideas in our heads, and it's as though these ideas, words, and concepts are opposites, and we're trying to make these two opposites interpenetrate. Now, this is true not only for us as individuals, but as cultures. And last time in the interview, we talked about the possibility that there may be an Eastern way of thinking and a Western way of thinking in the world. So there are possibly a number of geographies of dialectic thought around the world. Now, in this interview, we'll focus more on the theory, the constellation of ideas, and how that underpin our work. Okay, that ends my preamble. So, Otto, in terms of dialectic and as process and product, in your mind, is CDF best approached as more a product in a process or a process in a product?
Thank you, Brendan. I think most people do not immediately bring together two things that you said, which I will briefly link. You spoke of preconceptions that we have, needing to make an effort to reach the conceptual level. And the second idea is dialectic itself. So the question is, what does that making an effort to go from the preconceptual to the conceptual level have to do with dialectic. And what I would say is that, of course, this effort that is being made by the thinker is a process that we can follow empirically through interview, and we can assess how this process is structured in terms of thought forms, and we can give feedback to the speaker on this process. So in that sense, it's a process rising from the unconscious to the conscious. And I'm not sure immediately in what sense it would also be a product. Um, what would you exactly mean by product,
Right, okay.
Brendan?
So I'm imagining that I'm having a dialogue with you or with someone,
Yeah,
and I'm talking about government. I have a concept of government in my head.
yeah,
Is it helpful if I think of it as a product in process, that is, forms of government changing over time?
yeah.
Or is it better that I think of it as a process in product where there are various processes taking shape within the form of government?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, yeah. So, well, in terms of CDF, I would think that we need to think in both ways. And that wouldn't even be enough because we would want to use process thought forms and context thought forms, which is the product aspect. But then we would still not have covered relationships, not to speak of transformation. Would you agree? Would you see it that way too?
I think so. I think that we initially have a whole constellation of ideas or preconceptions in our heads, sort of like phantoms of ideas,
Yes.
and these are just like a whole constellation of concepts, and then we try and sort them out and express them, and they come out, as I say, unintentionally, because we're usually not conscious that this is happening at all.
Yes.
And so they just tumble out in a number of forms. And so then it's up to us as executive coaches then to appropriate as best we can how these concepts have just tumbled into shape.
Yeah, I think, and the same would be true in a team. You know, if you or I or we were a team leader, I think the same process could be observed, that we would help the team become aware consciously of the concepts that are being used. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, yeah. So thinking of CDF, of course, which has three assessments or three components, would you think of? Do you think that dialectic thought forms are equivalent to fluidity, or is it remediation, or is it just as challenges in relations?
Yeah, I think these concepts I would briefly like to explain to those who may not immediately know what they mean. Fluidity is a concept which we use in the dialectical thought form framework to calibrate the degree to which somebody can, in a particular interview in real time, show that he or she can use dialectical thought forms. So your fluidity in dialectical thinking may be low or it may be high, depending on the level of your cognitive development. That's one thing. And that is a measure of the degree of dialectical thinking. And it is based on the number of thought forms that are used by a speaker and also the degree of coordination between them. The second concept that Brandon used, remediation, is somewhat intrinsic to this dialectical thought form process, in that we are speaking of dialectical thought forms as mind openers and illuminators, meaning that when we use dialectical thought forms going beyond logical thinking, but still very strongly or permanently using logical thinking, that thereby we can illuminate, critically illuminate what's going on, not only in our speech, but in the world. And so the term remediation that comes from Arabeska has to do with remediation really means healing. It means doing away with fallacies, absences, uh, negativity, and all that nice stuff that we handle in dialectic, which I don't want to go into deep detail. In any way, I think a an easy term for understanding remediation is perhaps mind opening. I don't know what you think, Brendan. That's how I would.
Yeah, well, that's how you're talking. To me, as I also see it, or express it now,
Yeah.
as sort of weak relations. So
Okay.
with the client, I start engaging with the person, and I start interviewing them, and I get to know them a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's as though we have a weak relation.
Okay.
And then as I'm able to do the assessing of the person, find out what their needs and motivations are, the pressures they're under,
Yeah.
and as I find out their more about their social emotional stance, or at least how they might want to express it to me, and as I find out about how their thought forms are shaping and clunking together, bumping up against each other, then I can deepen my relations with them. I can really see the person for who they really are. But at any stage, I'm just in a weak relationship with them, and hopefully it's deepening all the time.
Yeah, that makes good sense to me. So we are speaking here of a personal relationship and getting to know somebody more deeply as we um, speak with them in real time. Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so if we think of this whole business of executive coaching or being into developmental with each other, and we're thinking about it as a change in these relationships or a change in remediations,
Yes.
the absenting of absences. How is it best to think of it? Is it best to think of it as just change, or is it as transformation, or a replacement of cognition?
Yeah, thank you. Most people mix up change and transformation. For me, and probably for you, change is just moving something from A to B, something not very deep, whereas transformation is includes change, but means that A actually is not just moved to B, but is becoming B. And so, the best, or one good example for that is adult development itself. In our life, we are constantly transforming into the next kind of person we are about to become. Um, so definitely, I think dialectical thinking, even if you don't combine it with developmental psychology as we do here, would have to do more with transformation than with change. But change is, of course, or process is an essential ingredient of it.
Right. So the client may be expressing quite strongly and clearly, for example, a dialectic thought form 13, and then as I engage with them, they may actually preference dialectic thought form 23. So we've seen that there is a change, also there's an increase in complexity in that dialectical thought form 23 is a transform um, thought form, and they are actually groping and wrestling with the fact of the change is becoming transformation.
Yes, so if we spell that out, thought form 13 is about the frame of reference somebody is presently speaking from, like, what a person knows and how he or she considers the situation they are in. We can call that an ideology or frame of reference. And when we as coaches make them aware that this constellation, this frame of reference is under, yeah, under transformation, and it's always transforming. And in fact, it is a goal of coaching to bring about a change of reference, frame of reference. Then yes, then we would move towards what we call thought form 23, which has to do with development, where we move into the future and focus on the potential of what could happen and what the person can do.
Right, and also we can think in terms of patterns. So a person may have be oscillating between and preferencing process thought form 4 and then go to 11 or 12 in context, and then back to process, another process thought form, and then back to a context thought form. We may see them oscillating between process and context, and through mind opening, then we may be able to get them to consider relations. So it's not a matter of oscillating backwards and forwards between two thought forms, but that we can deepen the relations between thoughts and forms of thoughts, and um, um, think of not so much as a pattern, but as a new way of connecting.
Yes, well, if you look at an interview that you have recorded and you have transcribed it and you now evaluate it in terms of DTF, uh, then you will see this back and forth between classes of thought forms that you were indicating. I think for listeners who don't know DTF, a simpler way of saying this is that all of what we talk about as thought forms are really ways to explicate what Berska calls four moments of dialectic. And four is much easier a number to handle than 28 or 12 or whatever. So I think that thought forms are basically crutches that, as beginners in dialectical thinking, we need to understand the moments of dialectic, which are context, process, relationship, and transformation. And in the end, if you are really a dialectical thinker, you can throw the thought forms away. No, you don't need them anymore. But yeah, in coaching, one way to promote cognitive development is indeed paying attention to the thought forms that a client is using and that oneself is using, and aiming to expand the number of thought forms used and their coordination. Where by coordination, I mean that, you look at something not just as a context, but as a process too, such as if you look at a beehive, you can say, oh, these are, two boxes, wooden boxes with frames in them. That would be the context view. But you could also say, well, a beehive is something organic that develops over the seasons, such that in the winter there may be 2,000 bees, and in the summer there will be 30,000 bees. And that's a process and it's a transformation. So if the more moments of dialectic we can use, the more complexity we can handle, I would say.
Okay, I'm with you still.
Okay.
how it might apply to clients or organisations or corporations.
Yes.
What would you say is mostly lacking in the thinking and practices of adult development communities?
Well, if you look at coaching, for instance, the message that adults develop over their lifetime has not sunk in. Uh, and this has the effect that 95% of coaching is what I call behavioral. And there is no mention of what I would call, and you would call also, a vertical development. And so when we look at vertical development, which is discontinuous and longitudinal, has nothing to do directly with behavior, then of course in CDF we would distinguish between the social emotional vertical development, which has to do with what Keegan calls meaning making, and the cognitive development that has to do with what um, I call cognitive and what Michael Bassett would also call cognitive. And so these strands, these two directions and strands of adult development, um, to this day, we don't really quite know how they hang together, but from assessments we have made at IDM, it's clear that they are very closely linked and related. And so that whole issue of vertical development of adults from 25 to 100 is presently not an issue in most coaching and not in consulting either. That's what I would say.
Okay. So, yes, thinking about what's missing in that community, um, what might help us going forward to increase our courage and strengthen our purpose of engaging more dialectically?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a difficult undertaking since um, if we attempt to put together, let's say, the thinking and cognitive development with with social emotional development in coaching, that's relatively easy because we can show the client by his or her own experience um, what that amounts to. So, for instance, if a client, a coachee tells me, I just don't seem to be able to get along with my boss, for him or her, that is a fact and a content of thinking. For me, it's an indication of a stage. Because I figure that knowing the social emotional development as looked at by CDF, that the client is expressing a frame of reference lying between Keegan stage 3 and 4, where 3 amounts to saying the client cannot really be self-authoring, but defines himself by others' expectations. Whereas in stage 4 of Keegan, we would assume, or we would, yeah, we would rightfully assume that the client is beyond that self uh, definition and now stands or is based on his own value system. And so when somebody says, I can't get along with my boss, the person I hear the following. I hear that there is an inner voice called my boss, which I don't know really is a voice of myself. And so I'm only looking at the boss as a physical other, whereas indeed the boss is really at the same time and even more than a physical other, an internalized other in me. And as long as I believe that I don't get along with the own voice in myself, which is called a boss, my boss, then I will not be self-authoring for sure. So I have to climb over this. My coach has to help me to climb over this barrier that I am assuming the boss is just an external other. I have to realize that he is something that determines my thinking about myself, And if he can do that, then I think he has done a great job pushing me forward to a higher level of meaning making. Now, this is not immediately a cognitive issue, but I will stop here and we can take up the cognitive issue, or we cannot, or we can.
Yeah, that's very helpful. I think in that what you're saying focuses or surfaces the whole issue of measurement and how we measure. So if we actually have much more awareness about the measurements that we're taking all the time when we look at the boss that we don't get on with, then we're making some progress, or we've got some hope of progress. Now, bearing in mind that Lovinger measures performance and Kohlberg sort of measures competence, and bearing in mind you make a big difference between content and structure, what is it that CDF is actually measuring, do you think?
I would say CDF is a theory of frame of reference. That means of unconscious preconceptions people have um, about the world and about themselves, which developmental theory has helped us make more clear and have more detailed knowledge about. So when I speak, I whether I want it or not, I speak as a meaning maker, social emotionally, that is, and I speak as a cognizer, cognitively, that is, and the two are related in a way that maybe it's too complex to discuss here, but they are closely related. And so, if I and in saying that, we are moving, I think, beyond Talbot and his competences. We are moving beyond Levenger and her meaning making also, or you even thought of Levenger as having to do with behavior or performance. I think we are moving beyond both of those um, into into a level where we look at meaning making together with thinking, and we separate the two. So I think in DTF, the hallmark of dealing with frame of reference is that we refuse to uh, merge meaning making and making sense. We distinguish them, and by distinguishing them, we also link them, because distinguishing is just a first step towards linking something. If I have not distinguished something, I also cannot link the two things I would be distinguishing. So I think frame of reference goes together with dialectical thinking. I should say, dealing with frame of reference, in contrast to Levenger and for instance, Talbot. Um, Directly leads us into dialectical thinking, because now we have to puzzle out the relationship between the social emotional and the cognitive component in the person's consciousness. That's how I would see it.
Okay, yeah. And what I'm hearing you say is that we're actually measuring the dialogue, the depth of dialogue that we're able to establish one with another.
Yes, yes, because we live in a language suffused world, to speak with Jacques, and there is just no world without language. And so, in language, we are actually creating the world that we speak about as being outside of us and real and external and all that. But we are actually constructing it. Not that it wouldn't be there if we were not constructing it, but it certainly wouldn't be there for us if we were not constructing it.
Okay, so in this context, in this frame, fluidity index means it's a measure of two people's capacity to engage with each other's minds. And as one person makes a move, the other person's able to move with them because they've got this fluidity index.
I would go a little, yes, sorry. I would go a little further. I would say that for me, Fluidity has to do with realism. That means the more fluid I am in dialectical thinking, the closer to the real world I am in the sense of Bhaskar. Because if I'm not a dialectical thinker, I would get overwhelmed by what Bhaskar calls actuality. And for me, the only way, or let's say the best way that I see to come close to the real world, which is not what shows up on TV, is dialectical thinking. So for me, fluidity in dialectical thinking and closeness to the real world are the same.
Okay. Excellent. I think I'm getting somewhere. This fluidity and being able to connect to the real is a capacity for us to be reflexive about organisation, about actually how we see the real world becomes organised.
Yeah, yes. I mean, not only in organizations, but certainly that's a major emphasis of work with CDF and DTF. Because we do care deeply about, what people who have the power to change the world are actually doing with that power. And we would like to, make them better decision makers who are able to think of, of the global world we are all part of now. And so it's very important to work with leaders. Is that what you are driving at?
Yes, yes. Because what I've been challenged to do through you is to link this dialectic thinking with other great thinkers that I've read and known, like Wilfred Bion, the great psychotherapist, and Marino, the great social mediator, and Roy Basker,
Yes,
who's worked at establishing a transformative model of social activity.
yes,
And these guys, Beyond, Marino, and Basker, are all working on the dilemma of how we encompass our mental effort and how we interparticipate and encounter each other as we try and transform ourselves and the world.
yes,
Is that how you see these other guys?
yes, yes, I would agree. And they are indeed complementary. I would agree with you as seeing them that way. Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for the thought. You've prompted me to think about CDF theory and how it actually becomes praxis. Is there anything more you'd like just to add about what we've said?
I think we owe the listeners to say a little bit more about Bion and Moreno and also Basca and why you and I think that they are linked or at least can be seen in relationship to each other. Would that be okay with you?
Yes.
So you are really the expert on Wilfred Bion and Moreno, much more than I. So could you maybe say a little bit more about how you see their work linked to what I have been able to put together? Mm, yeah.
Right. Well, as I said, they're also, like you, very intensely concerned with dialogue and what happens in the here and now moment as we
Yeah.
dialogue with each other,
Yes.
and then how we connect. And the value that you're adding, as I said, that you're actually being quite meticulous about the structuring of how we do
Yeah, I think this is true in the sense that I have made a major distinction between the content and structure of speech, actually following Jean Piaget in this, who also was looking for the structure of people's play and speech. I've done the same, except maybe even more rigorously, by saying, well, let's distinguish what people talk about and how they talk about it. Because you can talk about anything, like a house, for instance. If you choose that topic, you can talk about a house in terms of Roy Baskar's 4 moments of dialectic, as a static configuration that stands on the soil. You can talk about it as a process that not only as it is being built, it comes into being gradually and also fades away, although you may not see that right away. And it is in relationship with each other that the elements of the house make a whole. And without these relationships between roof and windows and door and so forth, there would be no house. And the transformation, well, there could be many examples of that. So this distinction of content and structure amounts to paying more attention to how something is thought about than what it is thought about. And as you know yourself, we are all tending to be totally fixated on the contents of what we're thinking. So what we are thinking. So DTF is actually a counter move to that, where we say, well, you would be really become a better decision maker, a better thinker, if you began to distinguish what you think from how you think, because that would lead you to thought forms who would show you that what you think can be thought about in at least 4 different ways, according to the moments of dialectic. So, so yes, I think this higher level of consciousness we actually need in this world of very high complexity. I think what managers and CEOs and basically everybody is struggling with today is the level of complexity. And I think dialectical thinking is the very best defense, so to speak, if we need to say defense, that we can come up with to handle complexity. And our life actually, individually and globally, I think depends on how well we can handle complexity.
Well, thanks for saying that. As you know, I think believe that if Bjorn, Rena, and Basker were alive and we were able to work with you on CDF and how to use it in various projects, then they'd be really excited and willing to do that work and further clarify what a praxis might be in these terms.
Yes, yes. Well, I'm honored you mentioned these big names. I have immensely learned from Bhaskar. I wish I had more knowledge of Bjorn and Moreno. But I want to thank you for putting CDF into this broader context of minds that so far I have had the privilege to outlive. But I hope there will be others who will outlive me and take this further.
Thank you.
Take care, Brendan. Thank you so much.